Hi everyone. I'm just here to show you how you can use Excel to do a lot of the calculations for you. I could tell from your results in your exercises and your exams that a lot of you are having trouble doing these sorts of calculations. And although it's mentioned in your textbook, you probably don't know how to use Excel, or some of you don't anyway. So I wanted to go over some of that for you. So the first thing I want to do is show you this first question, and it involves finding the standard deviation. So there could be a lot of calculations involved, and this is the sort of calculations you're going to be doing in your projects. So I want to make sure that you can do this in the easiest way possible. This particular problem, let X be a random variable representing the annual percentage return for the Vanguard total stock index for all stocks. That's the X values down here. Let Y be a random variable representing annual return for the Vanguard Balanced Index, 60% stock and 40% bond, which is really irrelevant to the problem. Here are the values for Y. For the past several years, assume the data to the left, and the sample means for X and Y are 10, 40, and 9 respectively. Here's the mean for X, and here's the mean for Y. Now, in order to calculate the standard deviation, which we are going to need because we're being asked to compute the coefficient of variation for each fund. So the first thing we need to do is calculate all our values for X. And then I listed all the values for the mean. They're all the same. The mean is the same. Because the next column is the X value minus the mean. Now, instead of doing that calculation yourself and plugging it into a calculator, you can have Excel do that for you. I'm going to click on that box and show you what is actually in there is not the number 4.6, but the formula. And the formula is using the column and row number to pick up the numbers that are in there, which are going to be calling for A3 minus B3. So A3 is this particular X value, and we're subtracting B3, which is the mean. And it will automatically do that calculation for you and put it in that box when you have type in this formula, equal A3 minus B3. The next box that we're going to use is taking that value that it just calculated, which is in C4, and it's going to square it. So we have, it was equal C3, and we take that C3 and we square it by using that little caret symbol, which is above the number 6 on your keyboard, and that just means within Excel to use it as an exponent. So we're taking what's in the cell C3, which is here, which is the difference between X and the mean, and we're squaring it. Now here's what I did next. I would select both of these boxes, right-click, and copy it, and then you can extend that. Instead of typing those formulas into all of them, you can then paste, and if you paste this here, it will actually, paste here, it actually does the calculations, and then you have that formula, A7 minus B7, A10 minus B10, and it does all that calculation for you. You don't have to do any of it, as long as you just make sure that you have the right calculation going on. So that's how we fill in everything here for the X's you're going to have to type in, and the mean you can copy and paste there. And here, the X value minus the mean will automatically be extended, and then the square of that difference will be right here. The next thing I do here is I will select all of these figures, and before that 104 was there, it was blank. If you click on that, I don't have that on my screen right here, but up there, there is the summation symbol. It's called AutoSum. And if you click auto sum, it will automatically add up these values and put the sum right here. I did the same thing here for all my squared values. I selected all of those and then I went to one square next, one box or cell next, and then it added all those numbers and put the sum right there. So that's how I got this sum and this sum. The next thing we're going to do, and let's see if I can get rid of that. That's still stuck there right now. When we are calculating the variance, we take the sum of those squared differences and divide it by n minus 1. Well, we have 10 values here, so n minus 1 is 9. And then here, it actually says variance above there where you can't see right now. I'm clicking on that cell and it did the calculation for me. It took D13, and don't forget that equal sign in the front, D13, which is the sum, it's right, one right there, it's the sum of the differences squared. And it divided it by D14, which was the number I plugged in here, n minus 1 or 9. And it calculated the variance there, and look what happens here to get the standard deviation. The formula I have in this box is equal square root of E14. It's up here, and that's what I typed in there. I didn't type that number in there. I typed in ESQRT in capital letters, and then in parentheses, the cell that I'm taking the square root of. And that was this cell here, E14. And then it takes the square root of that, and that becomes your standard deviation. So now to find our coefficient of variation, which I called CV here, we take the standard deviation and divide it by the mean and multiply that by 100%. So when I click on this box, which is where I put the formula, I have E16, which is this box right here. I just calculated the standard deviation, divided by, which is a slash, B3, which is the mean. I could have used B3, I'm sorry, I'm pointing to the wrong box here. B3 or B7 or any of these values here I can use for the mean. And then I multiplied that times 100, and that gives me my percent. And what I should be typing in here is my percent symbol, because that is the percent. And that was how I got the coefficient of variation for the x values. I went and did the exact same thing for the y values using the same formulas. I have all my y values here. I sum them up using that summation symbol to get my sum. I typed in all the means, and then I had Excel actually do the difference for me, x minus the mean. So in here I have A19, which is the y value, minus B19, which is the mean, and it did that calculation and got -3. Here in this box I have equal C19, which is that difference that I had over here, raised to the second power, or squared, and that will give me all those squared values right in all these boxes. If you look at all the formulas up at the top changing. I then used the summation here to get that number, and I plugged in n minus 1. Again, I have 10 numbers, and n minus 1 is then 9. And then to calculate the variance, I have the formula D29, which is that summation right here, D29, and divided it by, using a slash, D30, which is that number 9, which is just n minus 1. And that gave me my variance. To get the standard deviation, I have to take the square root of that variance. So what do you think is going to be there? I'm going to point to this cell, E30, and in this box, I'm going to take the square root of E30. So look what happens here. Equal SQRT, and then in parentheses, E30, and that automatically calculates the standard deviation for me. Again, here I have the same formula that I have up above. I have E32, which is my new standard deviation for the y values. I divided that by what's in B19, which could have been B19 or B20 or B28. Any of those numbers would work for the mean. And then multiply that times 100, and I got my coefficient of variation, which is a percent, so I'm going to add my percent symbol there. And there you have it, using Excel to do all the calculations for you. Let me know if you have any questions.